The dungeon was cold, but not bitterly so. The thick earthen walls protected the prisoners from freezing, but the only light was the single torch left by the guard. Amma was not sure if days or weeks had passed. "I have heard many stories about you, you know," the stonecutter said. He gave a restrained chuckle. "Stories about the storyteller. Strange, isn't it?" "What have you heard?" Amma asked. "Many things," the stonecutter said, "and each more marvelous than the other. They say you carried a dragon's pearl to your parents in your youth and later predicted the destruction of the first capital city. They say you know immortals and dragons." "Every time a story is told, it changes," Amma said. "Stories about myself are no different." "I was told you were honored by kings and even invited to reside at the imperial palace, but you refused," the stonecutter continued. "Instead, you chose to live in complete seclusion on Never-Ending Mountain." "Not in seclusion," Amma objected. "I have a granddaughter." "Ah," the stonecutter said, a glint of mischief flashing through his lopsided smile. "Then all the rest is true?" Amma laughed, suddenly appreciating the character of her companion. "Let me tell you a story," she said. And this is the story of the painted lion eyes. There was a girl who had a dragon for a friend. They loved each other deeply, so it was with great sadness when one day the dragon told her that they must part. "I've been given a mandate from heaven," he told her. "I will be helping the blue dragon bring in spring. It is a great honor, but once I begin, I cannot be seen by mortal eyes. We will never meet again." The girl tried to smile at her friend's good fortune, but she could not hide her dismay. "I always meant to watch over you," the dragon said, "but now I cannot. So I looked at your future in the Book of Fortune." "You should not have done that," the girl gasped. "I had to," the dragon said. "I could not leave without knowing your future." "Don't tell me," the girl said, raising her hands to cover her ears. "I should not know." The dragon gently lowered the girl's hands with his claws. "I must tell you this," the dragon said. "There will be a day when you will experience the greatest joy and the greatest sadness of your life at the same time. When that happens, you must watch the stone lions of your city. When the eyes of the stone lions turn red, you must take a boat to the closest island. There, you will find the iron rod." "The iron rod?" the girl said. "But it's at sea bottom, to keep the water steady." "Don't worry," the dragon said. "I have already obtained permission to borrow it for you." "For me?" the girl asked. "Yes," the dragon said. "For once you have found the iron rod, you must grab hold of it and not let go until the destruction is over." "The destruction?" the girl said. "The city will be destroyed. It has nothing to do with you, but you must not be there when it happens," the dragon said. "When it is over, throw the iron rod back into the sea." "Throw the iron rod?" the girl said. "But it must be enormous. How could I even lift it?" "The iron rod changes according to what is needed," the dragon said. "The Sea King's daughter even uses it as a needle sometimes, but that matters not. Do you understand all else I have said?" The girl nodded. "Do not forget," the dragon said. The forest fragrances of pine drifted around them. The dragon looked at her one more time. "I will always remember you," he said. Then he leaped into the air and flew away, the girl's tears blurring her last sight of him. Many years passed, and while she never forgot the dragon, his warning faded in significance. The girl grew to be a woman, married, had a child, and was quite happy. The woman was bestowed many honors and accolades throughout her life, but her daughter brought her greater joy than any of them. So even though it was not tradition, after her husband died, the woman went to live with her newly married daughter in the city. The woman, who was now old, did not enjoy city life. The city seemed cold-hearted to her. Merchants were ruthless in their dealings, and masters callous to their servants, and all called her naive when she objected. However, she was content enough, and they lived together in harmony. Then the old woman's daughter had a baby of her own, but alas, she did not live through childbirth. So as the old woman held the new baby tenderly, she rained tears of joy and sorrow upon it, and the baby's first bath was an unusual mixture of love and loss. For the birth of her beloved grandchild was just as the dragon had told her, the greatest joy and sadness at the same time. And remembering this, the old woman began to watch the eyes of the stone lions of the city. She worried for the others, warning any who would listen to her. When the lion's eyes turn red, she told people, the city will be destroyed. But no one believed her. As time went on, she became the laughingstock of the city. Embarrassed, her son-in-law pleaded and yelled by turns for her to stop her warnings, but the old woman did not stop. Finally, an unkind man decided to taunt her with more than words. When she arrived at the statues, he took out a jar of red paint and began to splash it upon the eyes of the lions. They're red now, he mocked. Should we be scared? Will the city be destroyed now? The old woman stood silently for a long moment. Then she ran back to her home, grabbed her prepared bags of possessions, and begged her son-in-law to flee with her. Her son-in-law, who had heard what had happened, felt he had borne enough disgrace. He stormed out, telling her he regretted ever marrying her daughter and that she and the baby were no longer welcome in his house. So, tying the baby to her chest, the woman left for the seashore. The nearest island was nothing more than a rock with the barest scrub of green. As the old woman approached in a rowboat, the birds swooped away in a billowing black curve, and she saw that in the middle of the empty rock grew a strange tree. It was straight and branchless, and when the old woman got nearer, she realized it was made of metal. It was the iron rod. As soon as her fingers grazed the cold metal, the earth began to grumble. The old woman quickly wrapped one arm around the iron rod, clasping her grandchild protectively with the other. And she was just in time. For as if all the earth dragons were awakening from nightmares, the grumbles became snarls, and the sea began to bellow. Huge waves crested and covered them, leaving the old woman gasping. She clung even tighter to the iron rod and the baby, who only stared up at her grandmother with eyes as old as a mountain. But the grandmother's eyes were fixed on the seashore. Even from the island, she could see the land rear towards the sky, and the tall buildings collapse and crumble as if made of sand. Above the thunderous destruction, she could hear screams and shrieks, and when the old woman closed her eyes, the salt water on her face was not only from the ocean waves. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the roars began to quiet, and the old woman raised her head. The baby began to whimper, and slowly the old woman loosened her hold on the iron rod. As soon as she no longer touched the metal, the iron rod began to shrink. It grew smaller and smaller until it was nothing more than a blade of grass. The old woman reached down and saw the iron rod was now a needle, fine and delicate. Silently, she threw the needle into the sea. A wave surged upward to catch it, and as it did, another wave pushed the rowboat towards the island, making it drift straight toward her. The old woman returned to the city, but could not now be called a city, for it was, as the dragon had predicted, destroyed. The few who had survived crawled out to cry at her feet. "Forgive us," they sobbed. "We should have listened to you." The old woman wept with them, finding no solace in having been right, for her son-in-law was among the dead. After burying her son-in-law, the old woman left the city. People treated her as a prophet or a sage, and she knew she was neither. All she wished was to raise her granddaughter, so small and precious, away from harm, and she remembered a mountain she had visited in her youth. "There," the old woman said to the baby in her arms, "that is where I will keep you safe." So they went to the mountain, and there on the mountain, whose top seemed to touch the moon, the old woman found peace and contentment. For her grandchild grew up protected and away from danger, and the only wish the old woman had was for that to never change. "And did it?" the stonecutter asked, his keen eyes looking at Hama in sympathy. "Stories cannot tell all," she said, and shrugged with heaviness, and the stonecutter saw her eyes suddenly haunted with worry. "I disagree," the stonecutter said, his hand reaching to pat Hama's. "I think stories tell everything." Thank you.